Best advice that I ever received is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's better off to have something to say than constantly feeling like you have something to do. When we use tools, we try to tell stories. Typically, we'll go for the latest and greatest, or at least aspire to something bigger. But there's a lot of times where just using something that we already have is the best thing for the job. Traveling around in the last 6 months has made me take some of the best photos and maybe keep some of the best memories I've ever had. Or at the very least, trying a Cam Mackie voiceover shooting anamorphic in the middle of nowhere. I've had the GFX 50R for the last 6 or 7 months, and I decided that instead of just talking about the camera, I show you what I actually did with it. So this is a little bit more of a chilled out video today. I've had my GFX 50R over the last 7 months. I picked this guy up in the winter and I've been using it for pretty much everything. I've been using it for travel photography, I've been using it for client work, and I've been using it as an everyday carry despite the fact that this is a little bit on the bigger side. In today's video, I'm pretty much gonna give you a 6 or 7 month update while also showing off some of the photos over the last couple of months. And we're gonna talk about, despite the fact that I've tried other cameras like the Nikon ZF, the GFX 100 RF, and as well as other cameras as well, why I keep coming back to this guy, despite the fact that the autofocus sucks, it doesn't have IBIS, and as well as it's a little bit of an older camera. But well, we'll get there. Now, because it's relative to photography as well, and also I suck at making thumbnails, this video is going to be sponsored by Artlist and one of their new tools. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, on my GFX 50R kit, I've had pretty much the exact same setup for the last few months. I do have a wooden grip on here to accommodate for my mutant-sized hands, and as well as I've been using the 50mm f3.5 lens pretty much this entire time I've had this camera. Now, some might say that might not give you the medium format look or whatever you want to call it, but what I do like is having a minimal kit for the last 7 months while using this guy. For one, it saves a lot on my wallet, and two, I don't have to fumble around with different lenses, and three, I do have to be a little bit more creative with the shots that I do get. Now, at a full frame equivalent, this is more like a 40mm f2 point something. I don't really know the number, but regardless, it is kind of a Goldilocks focal length for me because my favorite lens is going to be a 40mm Vespid Prime that it got stolen out of my car. Anyways, my 40mm was one of my favorite focal lengths, and it's nice to have that in a photography side of things, albeit you have to deal with the fact that you might not be able to get every shot that you want. There are a couple times where I've been traveling where I want to get a wider lens, or while I was doing a portrait session, I wanted something a bit more telephoto, and only having this 50mm obviously flies in the face of that because you only have one lens. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to get into Fuji cameras in general was going to be the film looks. I don't take on nearly as many photography jobs as I used to, so being able to shoot in RAW is super nice and I like having the option, but I don't want to have to edit photos all the time, and using some of the film stills that have proven to be really good on Fuji cameras is something that I like a lot. Now, when using Lightroom in order to do this, something always felt a little bit off. The processing of those RAW files when using Fuji cameras, I never really liked on Lightroom. Even when I changed the profile to be the direct film sim that I'm using, it always just looked not as good. Now, to remedy that, I have been using Capture One, which not only gives you the ability to view the JPEGs that are onto there with the film look already built into it, but at the same time, I can start to edit the raw photo while using that film simulation as a base. That way, if I took something that looked the way that it did in camera, if I need to adjust something that might need a little bit more information, it's based off of what that film look looks like and not necessarily what the raw photo looks like, which you would have in Lightroom. Speaking of film looks, I have been using Classic Negative over the last couple of months. I was a Classic Chrome type of person, but I've been put on to other recipes and I've dialed in the one that I like, and I've been using this exact recipe for pretty much everything. Sometimes when you're using this camera, it's nice to just find a couple of recipes or a couple of different film look customizations that you like, and then I just roll with those for the majority of everything that I do. Now, with the GFX sensor, which is slightly bigger than full frame, most people will call getting photos on this guy the medium format look, which I don't actually know the definition outside of the ideas that I can use longer focal lengths in terms of lenses and be closer to my subject at the same time, which is gonna give you a little bit more separation, or the appearance of more separation between what's in front of you and the background behind it. Now, for me personally, because I've been doing a lot of travel, a lot of things have been landscapes and other things like that, so it doesn't necessarily change my mind too much. I just like the image quality out of here, but I wouldn't necessarily call it the medium format look. I have done a couple of portrait sessions with these guys before, and a lot of of the autofocus areas look really great, even despite the fact that we're still using only 3.5 as our aperture. Now, I have used the f1.7 on the GFX 100, and those photos look great, and I've showed those a nauseating amount of times, but it does give you a lot of background separation, help isolate your subject. But at the same time, I think people just want a little bit more out of their images, and the flexibility to move a little bit closer while using longer focal lengths actually does have its use cases, especially when you're working on portraits. Now, we are going to talk about today's sponsor today, which is going to be Artlist, and the fact that I'm not the greatest at making thumbnails. Now, a lot of times I take a lot of time making these videos, but then I also kind of forget to make the thumbnail, which is going to be the first thing that you're going to see, so I'm kind of doing things backwards. But what you can do in Artlist's new generative AI in terms of images is you could merge up to 3 images at once in order to make one composite image. I took a photo of my GFX 50R, a random buffalo that I actually used Artlist AI generation to make, and then one of my landscape photos. I mixed them together and put in my own AI prompt. You might have to take a couple tries at this one. I actually tried this one and it didn't look the way that I wanted it to, but after a little bit of tweaking my prompt, I was able to get an image that makes sense for a thumbnail. This comes in handy, especially if you're someone who doesn't necessarily make thumbnails right away. Maybe you have them as an afterthought. My recommendation would be not to do that, but at the end of the day, if you're in a pinch, you need a composite image from some of the stuff you've already taken, you could use Artlist in order to do that. I'll leave a link in the description down below. I do like using this when I'm in a pinch and I need to get a thumbnail right away, and it worked out for this video. But speaking of which, let's keep talking about this video. Now, I have been talking about this guy as a daily driver, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I haven't used other cameras as well. I did actually have some time with the GFX 100 RF because I thought that was the camera that I would have replaced this guy with if this guy inevitably does stop working and becomes a dead camera. However, while using it, even despite the fact that the difference in the stop of the lens is only like 1/3 of a stop, and despite the fact that it's smaller, it has a lot of the same film sims, it has everything that on paper makes it a better camera, I still liked this one. I brought both cameras to Vancouver, British Columbia a couple of months ago, and I still found that I liked my 50R better than I liked the GFX 100 RF, which is a really weird thing to say because I do like new technology and I like getting new cameras, but every time I get a new camera, I end up just using this anyways. Now, I think that kind of goes into what would make the perfect kind of photography camera for myself. I don't really care the fact that this only shoots in 1080p video. I didn't buy this camera to shoot video. And also, I almost don't really care about its lack of autofocus because I just have other hybrid cameras that have autofocus. But I think if there were to make another camera that would entice me to maybe upgrade from this guy or switch to it, is if a brand made a camera that was A, reasonably priced, because that GFX 102 is diabolically priced. I don't really find any problems with the 50 megapixel photos coming out of the GFX 50R. One thing I would like though, if I was to change anything, is to maybe have some of the new film sims having a couple of the autofocusing features. And I think the odd time if I wanted to shoot a video, it would be better than shooting in 1080p, especially with the things that Fuji has been doing recently. However, I don't know if they're ever going to do that. I don't know if they're ever going to update this particular style of body, especially when they just came out with the point and shoot that's supposed to kind of fill the same gap. But that being said, I want to show off a bunch of photos. I want to show off a bunch of B-roll of me using this camera. And also, once a month, I like kind of checking in on the GFX 50R. A special shout out to Artlist for sponsoring this video. And if you guys are someone who's rocking the GFX 50R or you've picked up a new photography camera as your daily driver, leave a comment down below which ones you guys are using. Again, a special shout out to Artlist for sponsoring this video, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.